Happy Monday night, Saints fans, and especially to our Bayou Blitz family. I'm Brendan Boylan, joined by my partner in crime, my co-host. Do I say something nice this week and say maybe the better hair of the two of us? We'll say the better hair of the two of us, Bob Rose. Bob, it's going to be way past both of our bedtimes by the time this thing gets to halftime. But the New Orleans Saints taking on the Baltimore Ravens at home, Monday Night Football. How you feeling?
Well, first of all, good evening, Brendan. Good evening, Bayou Blitz family. And Brendan lies, and he knows he lies. I don't sleep. I keep hours like a reverse vampire. But I'll tell you, it's hard to believe that we're in week 9, and the Saints have yet to have a Sunday night or Monday night football game. It feels weird for a franchise that's been so much in the public eye, over most of Sean Payton's tenure. But I love Monday night games. They just have a different feel to it. And the Ravens coming into town. These are two very similar football teams in the way that they pay attention to the little things, special teams, the kicking game. They both like to get very physical. They both build their teams from the inside out, and both teams have explosive, dynamic athletes, who can beat you in multiple ways. So I do think that this is going to be an exciting game.
Well, let's start here, Bob. Let's start with the injury report and, of course, some of the moves that happened today. You can correct me because you're the man with the plan most times. But for the New Orleans Saints, they have signed wide receiver Kevin White to the 53-man roster. PJ Williams has been activated from injured reserve. He will give it a go tonight. They have placed Chase Hansen on IR. And Jordan Howard has a standard elevation from the practice squad. He will be running back 2, or in Bob's words, really running back 3, because Taysom Hill will be more of a running back 2. But those are your elevations and some other moves that are going on for the Saints prior to today. And let's talk about the inactives, Bob, because at least for me, there's one guy I was a little surprised to see sitting out. But Mark Ingram, Marshawn Lattimore, Wyatt Davis, Nick Vannett are all inactive. Jarvis Landry is the one that I had some hope that he was going to play. He'll miss his 5th straight matchup this week, but that catches you up with the injury report and the transactions that occurred here today. Bob, what do you make of some of those transactions? I mean, there's nothing there that nobody saw coming. And same with the injury report for the most part, maybe outside of Jarvis Landry. But with what the Saints have going into this week, who do you need to see step up, and what are your overall thoughts?
Well, first of all, the Ravens are going to be missing some key people too. Yep. Their leading receiver, really their only major consistently effective receiver is tight end Mark Andrews. He's going to be out tonight. Their leading wideout, Rashad Bateman, former number 1 draft choice. He's out for the year. He's on injured reserve. And unless something changed at the last minute, they're going to be missing one of their top 2 running backs, Gus Edwards. And with J.K. Dobbins already on injured reserve, that's some big news on the Ravens side. I, for one, wasn't surprised that Jarvis Landry is not going to suit up. Yeah, I know he's practiced for the last 3 days, but it's been on limited basis. It does sound like he's trending in the right direction. But listen, if you're a member of Saints media, and especially if you're a fan of the team, with what has happened with Michael Thomas, really the last 2.5 years, and other injuries throughout the team, you have to at this point take I'll believe it when I see it. As far as any of these players getting back onto the field. And I know it's frustrating, but New Orleans, as many NFL teams, New Orleans has to take a next man up approach. Marshawn Lattimore is obviously the biggest key on either the offensive or defensive side for New Orleans is going to be missing. But fortunately, and knock on wood when I say this, because I don't want to sound like I'm taking the Ravens passing game lightly, but if there was a game for Marshawn Lattimore to sit out where you feel fairly comfortable in what the Saints defense is still able to accomplish, it's going to be this one. Because the players on the Saints, the secondary has to be very, very wary of the big play and coverage containment over the top when Lamar Jackson breaks away from pressure. But for the most part, the Ravens just want to pound the rock at you. They want to hit you, with Lamar Jackson on misdirection runs and those explosive plays that he performs with his legs. And they want to pound it inside, probably with Kenyon Drake more often than not. The Ravens are a run-first team that uses their passing game, I'm not going to say trickery, but that to hit you over the top, with play action and quick hitters like that. So Lattimore, especially against a short-handed Ravens receiving core that isn't going to scare too many defenses, even when healthy. I think Alontae Taylor and Paulson Adebo are more than up to the task of dealing with the Ravens wideouts, and number 2 and number 3 tight ends. But it's that defensive line and linebacking core that I'm going to be watching most closely for the New Orleans Saints defense throughout tonight.
Before we jump into that defensive line that really showed out last week, and that linebacker matchup that I highlighted as an X factor going into tonight's matchup, how do you think bringing a guy like PJ Williams back off IR, even if he's on a snap count this week, is going to help what really is, and what people forget, is a very young Saints defensive backfield, at least at the cornerback and even the nickelback spot?
I think it's big. I think it's a lot bigger than people realize. PJ Williams is no Marshawn Lattimore. PJ Williams is not even Bradley Roby. But what PJ brings is versatility to the secondary. We know this because we've seen him do it. He can play a 2 deep safety. He could play in the box. He's a pretty short tackler. You don't want him as an outside cornerback, like, ever. But he is one of their top options in the slot and has been throughout his Saints career. So that means that you don't have to force Tyrann Mathieu or Marcus May up into the slot. You can leave those guys back, where I think at this point in their career, they're a little bit more effective as deeper safeties. If you're playing PJ in the slot, you don't have to use Justin Evans on as many snaps. You can kind of mix and match what you're doing in slot coverage. And not to mention the fact that PJ he's a playmaker. He's always around the ball. He knows this defense very, very well. And like I said, he's a sound open field tackler, which is something this entire defensive backfield has struggled with throughout the season. So I think the return of PJ Williams, regardless of how many snaps he does play, I think that's an underrated key for the Saints defense.
Yeah, not just this week, but moving forward. I'm going to be curious a little bit more moving forward, Bob, is with the return of Williams, how does that allow the New Orleans Saints defense to kind of toy around and put Tyrann Mathieu in different spots? Because Mathieu, too, is a playmaker in that secondary. And the more that you can use the versatility of the Honey Badger, I think the better off the New Orleans Saints are going to be. So I think PJ also kind of unlocks a little bit of that for the Saints secondary. Moving into the linebacking corps and the defensive line, I think it's really easy, especially with everything that you said earlier about the Baltimore Ravens being a team that wants to run the football and they want to pound it down your throat. You could really point towards the interior of the defensive line. You could certainly highlight those edge guys because you want to be able to keep containment on a guy like Lamar Jackson. How crucial is that tonight? And if you got to pick one guy off the defensive line, who are you highlighting and keying in on while you watch tonight?
It is going to be a wonderful athletic matchup between Lamar Jackson, and the edge rushers of New Orleans, namely Marcus Davenport, Cam Jordan, and of course the linebackers, Pete Werner and Demario Davis. Now, as wonderfully athletic as those 4 guys are, they're not the athlete that Lamar Jackson is. Not with his legs. In fact, not many are. Therefore, the one player that I think is key to tonight is David Onyemata. And only because you asked me to highlight one player, I'd more prefer to highlight one position. That's the defensive tackles. But Onyemata, Kentavious Street, both had outstanding outings against the Raiders, as good as we've seen them play this year. As a unit, that defensive tackle spot, they just got consistent penetration on the Raiders line. That blew up their running game. And if they can get that kind of penetration again, that nullifies the inside attack for the Ravens run, namely Kenyon Drake, and it forces Lamar Jackson, when he does pass, he's going to have to get rid of the ball extremely quickly. And although they like to do that by design, if you make him get rid of it before he's ready, he will throw the ball up for grabs. That, and if you get him on the run, make Lamar take a wider berth on those outside and off tackle runs. That gives guys like DeMario and Pete Werner a chance to beat Lamar to the corner. It gives guys like Marcus Davenport, Cam Jordan, Peyton Turner, who played extremely well last week. It gives those guys the angle before Lamar gets to the corner. And that's why I think, while those guys have to remain very disciplined yet aggressive in their rush assignments, it's the interior pressure that's going to make or break the Saints defense tonight.
Talked about those linebackers. I specifically highlighted Demario Davis at a piece this week, mostly because of his knowledge, his IQ, his intelligence of the game, and being able to set the Saints up for success against a really interesting look. I mean, you and I talked about it earlier this week with what John Harbaugh has been able to do with this Ravens team, going from a quarterback in Joe Flacco, ripping that playbook to shreds, inserting Lamar Jackson, and just kind of rewriting what the Baltimore offense is going to look like. I think DeMario is going to be a big piece for New Orleans tonight. He also is currently ranked as the top linebacker in the league heading into this week by Pro Football Focus. Take that as you will. Some people have some problems with Pro Football Focus, others don't. But nonetheless, DeMario has had an underrated season yet again, Bob. What are you looking for out of him? Obviously, he's not the athletic freak that Lamar Jackson is, like you alluded to. There's not many that are. So when you're not looking for Demario Davis to sit and try to chase down Lamar Jackson, what are you looking out of him tonight in terms of leadership?
Well, that's the thing with Demario Davis. He is a terrific athlete, and one of the keys to his game is the sideline to sideline pursuit. But what sets DeMario apart from most of his contemporaries is his ability to anticipate. And that's how you beat Lamar Jackson. You outthink him. You aren't necessarily going to outrun him to the sideline. You definitely aren't going to outrun him in the open field. But if you outthink him, if you make the correct read and get to a spot before he does, especially on those RPOs or those play actions, where he fakes the gut handoff, drops back, and gives those quick hitters over the middle, especially to Mark Andrews. Those plays have been made famous. If DeMario can read that accurately and decisively, then he can get a jump on Lamar as far as the playmaker on the ball, and that will kind of have a stone rolling down the hill effect for the rest of the defense. Because Lamar may not turn the ball over a lot, but when he does, the turnovers seem to come in bunches. And again, it's usually against very intelligent defenses, that can outread him, that can outthink him, and that can anticipate what he's going to do before he does it. And it's just as much the mental game that sets Demario Davis apart, as much as it is his physical abilities.
One of the smartest linebackers in the league, and how fortunate the Saints have been at that middle linebacker spot. Obviously, there's some exceptions, but to have a guy like Jonathan Vilma, who had such a high football IQ, you had some years there, Curtis Lofton, Deweese mentioned Stephon Anthony. Bob gets the point. You guys are smiling, watching us live too. You know the pain of some of those teams we had to cover them. And then you go and you land a guy like Demario Davis, who really, before getting to New Orleans, looked to be at potentially the tail end of his career as well, and has definitely revitalized it. Bob, switching to the offense for the New Orleans Saints, one of the underrated things about the Saints this year is they're one of the best offenses in football statistically in terms of yards, in terms of points per game under Andy Dalton. They are still without some really big pieces at receiver. If you're just joining the show, Jarvis Landry will miss his 5th consecutive game. And if maybe you just took a little bit of a nap this week, Michael Thomas is going to be on IR, so he's out at least 4 weeks. And Dennis Allen made it sound like Thomas is more than likely done for the year. Wouldn't completely close the book on it, but on the last chapter or so, if you will. So the Saints are going to be without some big targets. They signed Kevin White to the 53-man roster. So that really leaves you with Olave, Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway, Kevin White, Shaheed, who, has had some moments, and they've definitely sprinkled him into the offense. It leaves you with that and Adam Troutman returning this week, correct? So there's some options there. Obviously, Alvin Kamara being the workhorse that he's been for New Orleans. How do you see New Orleans battling a Ravens defense that is not the Ravens defense of the mid-2000s, but still has an identity of being a really tough, physical football team?
Yeah, and that's just it. The Ravens are, as long as John Harbaugh is their coach, the Ravens are always going to be a tough, physical, rugged defensive team. And they are going to be extremely aggressive on that side of the ball, too. So that part of the Baltimore Ravens has not changed. It's very difficult to run the ball on the Baltimore Ravens. That part has not changed. But the thing that we know about the New Orleans Saints and the thing that we know about Pete Carmichael is that Pete has stayed very patient and very creative with the running attack this year, not only with Alvin Kamara, but also the way and the timing that he uses Taysom Hill. I do expect Jordan Howard to get a handful of touches, at least a half dozen to 8 touches, in significant moments of this ball game too, just to probe the inside of that Ravens defense. Baltimore runs a base 3-4 alignment, but their linebackers are very deep, very athletic, and sideline to sideline guys. But the Ravens are somewhat thin up front. So if Pete can remain patient and effective with that running game, you might be able to break a couple runs as the game progresses and wear that front down a little bit. Thereby, giving Andy Dalton some play action opportunities to freeze those linebackers. And Baltimore has been very susceptible, to deep passing plays over the middle. They're a little bit soft there. Now it's and I know we'll get into this in a minute. The acquisition of Roquan Smith in a trade with the Chicago Bears was specifically to fortify that weak middle gut of the Ravens defense, pass defense in particular. It only remains to be seen how much Roquan will play tonight, but we can expect this Saints offense to revolve around Alvin Kamara with a lot of targets to Chris Olave sprinkled in, and keep an eye on Juwan Johnson. Juwan is playing better and better each week. Brendan and I have highlighted him for the last couple of weeks. We just got done talking about how the Ravens have been vulnerable over that deep middle, where that's an area where Juwan Johnson can thrive. That's an area where Alvin Kamara on those option routes out of the backfield, where he can beat a defense, and might target the Ravens linebacking core, deep there. But it all starts with winning the battles up front, and being patient and creative with your running game.
We'll see how the Saints decide to sprinkle in Jordan Howard. I did see Derek asked, do we see Jordan Howard tonight? He was elevated from the practice squad. He will be giving it a go. He will make his Saints debut tonight. Roquan is a really interesting piece for the Ravens. I think it was a terrific acquisition for them. I also think that the fact that the Bears accepted the offer that they did, I thought he was worth more personally. I had a chance to meet with Roquan prior to the draft, and just seeing him coming out of Georgia, and that Georgia team, I believe that was the Georgia team that lost to Alabama and Tua on that 4th and 20 or 2nd and 26 or whatever the play was in Atlanta. Could be getting my years mixed up. But anyway, meeting Roquan back then, you could see just the pure size, and then you throw the tape on. You're like, there's no way. There's no way he should be moving like that. I mean, he is one of the most athletic linebackers I've seen in my time covering the league. and he's one of the most athletic linebackers in the league today. I don't think he gets a whole lot of snaps, but I do think with a little bit of extra time to prepare this week, he might have a really interesting matchup with Alvin Kamara, especially in third and longs, in moments where you know that Kamara is going to be running routes. And you can simply go, hey, Roquan, man-to-man that guy over there because you're the most athletic linebacker that we have. I could definitely see some moments for Smith in that category. How do the Saints beat that?
Patience. Patience and trying to take advantage of the inexperience that Roquan Smith is going to have in the Baltimore scheme. The last few weeks, last 4 weeks, Alvin Kamara has caught 28 passes. So, while it's terrific to see him involved in the passing game again, something that we didn't really see at all for almost a full calendar year. Don't think for 1 second that John Harbaugh and Ravens coordinator, defensive coordinator, I think his first name is Mike, but I know his last name is McDonald. They have been digesting tape on Alvin Kamara all week, and these are good, solid defensive coaches. So they're going to put together a game plan specifically designed to contain Kamara, and it's going to heavily involve Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, no doubt. So the way you beat that is, I'm not going to say use Kamara as a decoy, but use him in different ways. Last week against the Raiders, we saw him take a lot of those option routes out of the backfield, give a fake to the outside, and then beat the Raiders linebackers over the middle. If they're going to bracket Kamara in that way, then you do a couple double fakes. Or you line him up on the outside and kind of flare him out. You do a sideline route. We have seen Alvin Kamara run sideline routes as good as any Pro Bowl wideout in the NFL. So we know he is capable of doing that. And if you can draw one or both of those athletic Ravens linebackers outside to follow Kamara, then what did we just get done saying? You have a Jawan Johnson over the middle. You have an Adam Troutman over the middle. Troutman's not going to beat you for an 80-yard touchdown run or anything like that, but he can make a key 8, 10, 12-yard a 12-yard slant or 12-yard crossing pattern over the middle. So you need to use your complementary weapons against a Ravens team that's not going to be beat very often up here.
Looking at Andy Dalton, and we talked about this on Wednesday. We've talked about it at lengths with the Saints News Network as well. It looks like Andy's going to be the guy. Barring injury, Andy's going to be the guy throughout the rest of the season. What are some things that Andy Dalton brings to this offense, not just this week, but in the weeks moving forward, that should have Saints fans excited even without the receiver talent that we thought that we'd have this year?
Well, let's start there. Andy Dalton has been an extremely efficient quarterback without Michael Thomas for every single one of his starts, without Jarvis Landry for every single one of his starts. He didn't have Chris Olave for one of those games, and I believe he was without Alvin Kamara for one of those games. Yet the Saints in 5 Andy Dalton starts, they've averaged 30 points per game, over 400 yards of total offense. Andy has thrown 4 interceptions, but 3 of those came in one game, so he's taking care of the football. The rest of the offense is stepping up, whether it's because Andy Dalton is in that huddle, whether that's a coincidence or not. Nobody knows the answer to that, but the numbers bear themselves out. Andy's only been sacked 4 times in 5 games, and none at all, knock on wood, for the last 2 games. Meanwhile, Jameis Winston went down 11 times and was hit, I don't even know how many times, in 1 less start. And actually 2 less starts. Jameis started 3 games. So, the Dalton and the Saints are taking care of the football better. They're working defenses from sideline to sideline instead of forcing big plays down the field. They're not asking Andy to do it by himself. They're having him get rid of the ball quickly. They're using Taysom Hill in creative ways. They're using Alvin Kamara in creative ways, and they're revolving their downfield passing attack with to their best weapon, in the receiving core, and that is rookie wideout Chris Olave. So it's very simple football 1-on-1. You beat up the guys in the trenches. You get the ball to your playmakers as quickly as you can, in a position for them to make plays. And your quarterback, I hate the term game manager, but your quarterback very smartly digests the game plan and and beats the defense in ways that the defense allows them to themselves to be beaten.
Only about 5 minutes left in our pregame show. We're bringing you as close to kickoff as we can this evening, folks. Bob, we talked about a lot of different positions for New Orleans, a lot of different playmakers for both sides. Where's this game going to be won and lost?
The trenches and the sidelines. The New Orleans Saints have been beating people up with their offensive line really over the last month or so. That trend has to continue. I highly doubt you're going to run the ball for 180 or 200 yards on the Baltimore Ravens. But if you can average a good solid 4 to 4.5 yards per carry consistently, move the chains and get about 120, 130 effective yards on the ground, then that's going to slow down that Ravens blitz and allow Andy Dalton to efficiently work the passing game, work it around. The complementary weapons need to step up, whether it's Juwan Johnson, Adam Troutman, whether we get a primetime sighting of Traquan Smith, which has tended to happen over Traquan's career. That's why I'm going to call him Traquan and not what I usually call him on a Monday night. Or maybe it's a Marquez Callaway or a Rashid Shaheed that steps up. I love seeing Shaheed more involved in the offense within the last 2 weeks now. So maybe that rookie is reaching a comfort level that gives Pete Carmichael another speedy toy to play with on that side. Defensively, obviously, you have to contain Lamar Jackson. He's going to get his, especially with his legs. He's too good not to. What you need to do is keep those 25 and 30-plus yard runs to Lamar down to 8 and 10 yards. You hit him. You make him get rid of the ball quickly when he does decide to pass, and you don't let any other Ravens runner beat you. If a guy's going to beat you with his legs, make it be Lamar. And like I said, limit his effectiveness, where eventually the Ravens coaching staff says, okay, we're not going to beat them using just Lamar's legs. He's going to have to use his arm too. With that whittled down receiving core, that gives your secondary an opportunity to make plays, but you need to stay disciplined in your coverage assignments, stay disciplined on your edge assignments, get penetration up the middle like we talked about, and most importantly, make the damn tackle in the open field.
I'm going to go a little less specific than Bob did there, but I'm going to say second down. Now hear me out. The game's going to be won and lost on second down for both offenses, particularly for the New Orleans Saints offense. When you're missing the amount of talent that you are at wideout, you have to make third downs easy and manageable. Whether you can just hand it off to Kamara or Taysom Hill on a 3rd and 2 or a 3rd and 3, that's going to be a lot better than putting Dalton in a situation where it's 3rd and 10. And what was the biggest knock on this receiving corps last year? The inability to create separation. A lot of that still stands true. Defensively for New Orleans, the more that you can make Lamar Jackson throw the ball, the better off you're going to be. Make sure you get those Ravens in a 3rd and long situations where you can pin your ears back, go after the quarterback, keep a spy, heck, maybe even 2 spies with a guy as talented as Lamar Jackson, but make him throw the football. So I really think this game is going to be won and lost on second down for both sides. Now, Bob, before we give our predictions, before we give out our social media handles that everybody should just have memorized, like tattooed on their arms at this point. If you're used to hanging out with us on Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, whatever day of the week, you brought up that the Saints had some great success. You pointed out Traquan Smith in particularly, but the Saints have had great success at home over the years in prime time, whether that's Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, what have you. Some of that has been lost over the years, recaptured, and then lost again. Mm-hmm. How do the Saints recapture their success on Monday Night Football in the Superdome?
They ride the momentum that they built up for themselves, offensive and defensively, over the last couple of weeks. Defensively, especially last week, offensively, this is a unit that's grown in confidence, and you could see it on the field. Their confidence has grown really over the last month. So you ride that confidence very aggressively to open this game. You use your Superdome crowd, to get who's definitely going to be behind you 100%, to help you ride that momentum. And you bring the lumber defensively early. You keep the Ravens defense off their off balance and on their toes early on with your offensive game plan. It's going to be about experience. Tyrann Mathieu has played against the Ravens a lot. Andy Dalton has played against the Ravens a lot. John Harbaugh has remained the coach. Lamar Jackson remains the quarterback. These guys are used to seeing these other guys, even though they're out of conference opponents. And as our John Hendricks is so fond of reminding us, and he has for since the schedule has come out, the New Orleans Saints have never beaten the Baltimore Ravens in the Superdome. One of those weird NFL statistics. Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, they've silenced some of their critics over the last couple of weeks, and the Saints have yet to win 2 games in a row this year. That kind of thing resonates with the leadership in that locker room and the leadership in that huddle. And I think that these guys are going to be, very focused when they come out. They know what they can do, when they eliminate the self-inflicted mistakes that plague them over the, first month or so. And that's why I think that this team is riding a wave of confidence right now. And like I said, to grab that primetime momentum back, you got to ride that confidence, into this game and come out very aggressively.
Bob, remember that the New Orleans Saints defeated the Ravens a few years back, and that completed Drew Brees' cycle of beating all 32 teams. He threw touchdown pass 500 in that game to Benjamin Watson as well. But that just goes to show how little success the Saints have had against the Ravens in both the history of both franchises. Now let's go into our predictions for the game. Myself, Bob, I specifically said this week for fantasy football players, owners, it's a little late to make the change because it's Monday, but I hope you're not starting the Saints defense this week. And I don't mean that the Saints are going to get gashed by any means, but you're not going to have a repeat performance of last week. And that's just because of how dominant Lamar Jackson has been throughout the year, and the Saints' lack of success against quarterback types like Lamar Jackson, not just this year, but in years past as well. I think the Saints defense does enough to give the offense a chance to win the football game. And the offense has been very good, but I don't see this being a Saints defense that keeps Lamar Jackson out of the end zone, multiple times. I think the New Orleans Saints win the football game overall. I think they get right to about that 30-point mark that the offense has been averaging. And I'm going to take the Saints in this one 31-24. A little high scoring Monday night, some little classic Monday night Saints action for the Houdat Nation, but I do see Lamar Jackson having success. And this is a team that is just filled with talent for a big play, whether it's in the passing game, running game, even special teams. I mean, they had an all-pro returner from a year ago. So I do see the Ravens scoring points, but I do think the Saints score some more.
I disagree with you slightly, Brendan. And since I'm going to say this, you watch it be like a 38-35 game. But what I was about to say was that I'd be surprised is if one of these teams reach even the 30-point mark. I don't think that's because the defenses will dominate. I think both offenses will move the football between the 20s. But what's lost is both New Orleans and Baltimore have very, very good red zone defenses. So I do think that the Saints are going to have a hard time containing Lamar Jackson's legs. But when everything gets tightened up in there in the red zone, that's when I think you're going to see guys like Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, and Pete Werner make some big plays to maybe hold Ravens touchdown opportunities into field goals. And by that same notion, I do think Andy Dalton, Alvin Kamara, they're going to move the football offensively, but without without a Jarvis Landry or a Michael Thomas to dominate those Ravens cornerbacks, and we didn't even talk about them. Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey are both very, very good cornerbacks, but they're riverboat gamblers. They can be beat on a lot of double moves and things like that. That's another reason that the Ravens have been susceptible to the big play. So I do think that the Saints are going to make some plays over the top tonight. Watch for that. But yeah, again, the Ravens are very, very good and very, very physical in the red zone. So I see some Saints opportunities also for touchdowns turning into field goals. So yeah. I do expect both teams are going to rack up yards, but points, touchdowns are going to be very difficult to come by. I do think the Saints are going to have the upper hand by the time it's all said and done, but I think it's going to be a very close game. I'm going to go New Orleans 24, Baltimore 23.
Hey, but remember what we said about kickers.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and they got to, honestly, I mean, Justin Tucker, Will Lutz, two of the best in the game. So it could come down to kickers. Bob, where can everybody follow you on the World Wide Web?
Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to our Bayou Blitz pregame show, sponsored by the Saints News Network. And make sure you join Brendan Boylan and I again at halftime, hopefully with big old smiles on our faces and not destruction in the background like you've witnessed with me in the past. In the meantime, you can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose. I'm over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. All of us, myself, Brendan Boylan, John Hendricks, and our boss, Kyle T. Mosley, follow all of our works through the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, and please give our Bayou Blitz Facebook page a follow, and make sure that you jump onto our Bayou Blitz Twitter page. And as almost always, Brendan, I forgot our handle again.
Oh, man. I almost gave you credit. I was about to say, look at Bob go. Yeah, follow us on Twitter. It's at Bayou Blitz Pod. We'll be having some great guests on the next 2 Wednesdays. So we're really looking forward to that. For myself, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at BT Boylan. Fantasy football work with the Saints News Network at Saints News. I did want to give a quick shout out before we sign off. Delvin Breaux, our friend, advancing to the Western Conference Final in the CFL, going for a chance at Grey Cup Final number 4.
Beautiful.
If they win. So congrats to Delvin, who I know has been struggling with some injuries this year. We will definitely have him on the show when the CFL season wraps up. But congrats to Delvin for another successful CFL season. And to you guys, we thank you so much for tuning into the pregame show. We will be back for halftime, like Bob said, same place. And hopefully the New Orleans Saints can recapture some of that Monday night magic in the Superdome. Until then, that's Bob Rose. I'm Brendan Boylan. This has been the Bayou Blitz pregame show. We'll see you at halftime.